Hi everyone, my name is Bart, and during the next few minutes, I'll teach you how you can easily combine layers using Adobe Photoshop's advanced blending options. Let's get started. Here in Photoshop, I have two layers, one layer of a moon image and another image of a dark cloudy sky. The idea of this exercise is to blend the moon into the background. Now, most of the time you'll see tutorials and tips where you might use the screen blending mode, but when I try this in this project, you can see that it's not perfect. I can still see the edges of the layer boundary, for example here on the right, since this wasn't completely black in the original image. And the moon is sitting in front of the dark clouds, while in my project I need the moon to be in the background and not the foreground. So it looks like we need a little bit more work. So let's switch back to the normal blending mode first. Another thing that I would like to achieve is a subtle outer glow effect around the moon itself, and not the boundary of the layer. So I need a way to isolate the moon first. Now I can work with selections and layer masks, but I don't want to use a layer mask for this scenario, and instead teach you something completely new. Well, let's open the layers blending options, and here at the bottom I'll use the blend if sliders. Now these two sliders, when on gray mode, allow me to change the opacity of pixels based on the gray levels of either the layer itself or the underlying layer. So when I drag this slider inwards, for example, you'll see that parts of the layer become transparent. So every level I exclude becomes transparent. Let's isolate the moon first. So I'll just drag in this left slider first, like this. And notice the little vertical line in the actual slider itself. What happens is I can hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on PC and split this up into two separate sliders. So now I have a more gradual effect towards transparency, which will basically help me to avoid having these hard edges around my moon. Now this is starting to look good. But there's a problem. Look what happens when I do try to add my outer glow effect now. Notice how it's still being based on the layer edges. Well, that's because I'm actually just hiding information. I'm not deleting anything. So I need to actually remove this from the layer, but in such a way that it's preferably non-destructive. And you know what the trick is? Smart objects. I like smart objects. Now, first of all, let's close this. Let's right-click the image and choose Convert to Smart Object. Now notice that the black background from this layer has been removed. Now no worries, it is still there. So when I double click the layer, you'll see that it is still there. So I can always come back to the original if I need to. But in the main project, this is actually removed from the layer itself. So now I can add my outer glow effect without any problems. Okay, now this is good. Now it's time to blend in the layer even further. Now, I'm going to do this using the screen blending mode. But before I do this, I would like to blur the layer just a tiny little bit, because this will help with the overall effect. And since this is a smart object already, I can just come into the filter menu and choose Gaussian blur. I think 1 pixel will suffice. Now notice this is added now as a smart filter, so this is again non-destructive. Now we'll choose the screen blending mode to make the moon look even better. Now, notice I'm still having issues with the clouds here. The moon is clearly sitting on top of the clouds, so I need a way to hide the moon behind the clouds instead. Now in this scenario, you might be tempted to work with the cloud image itself and not with the moon image, because you might be using a layer mask, maybe an alpha channel, magic wand, make selections, do other stuff. Or maybe you just duplicate the layer itself. Place it on top of the moon, use blending options like multiply and whatever. Now these techniques, they might be useful, but they all require a lot of work. And I know in this scenario that this will not give me the effect that I'm looking for. So let's try something else. And the trick to resolving this is by not placing the clouds on top of the moon, but by moving the moon behind the clouds, well, at least visually. Now I'll open up the layer blending options again of the moon image itself, the moon layer. Now notice the second slider that says underlying layer. So in this case, this means the image with the dark clouds. So I'll use that one instead. Now if I drag this inwards like this, see? Now it seems like the moon is behind the clouds. Let me just make this a little bit better. There we go. Let's drag open these as well. Okay. Now, the cool thing about this is a very, very dynamic way of working. Look, when I click OK, let me close this window, and let's try to move the moon around. Look what happens. Isn't that cool? We now have a perfectly blended image. So next time my art director or client, whoever, they ask me to move it to another part of the image, well, I can, just without changing layer masks, without reselecting anything. This is just done. Now, let's add something extra to finish this project, because I can even animate this now in Photoshop. Now let me crop this composition. Let's open up the timeline here at the bottom, and let's animate the background image. So I'll put a keyframe here for position, and I also put a keyframe at the very end, and move this around. And let's hit the play button. And as you can see, I even created an animation using the same blending technique. Well, that's it for today. I hope you found this trick very useful. Thanks for watching, and until next time.